There once was an abomination who had no place in this world. She clutched this doll tightly, and eventually was drawn into a cold and lonely painted world. The Painted World of Ariamis is a optional area in From Software's 2011 game Dark Souls. I'm sure most of you watching know about the Dark Souls series by now, so I won't go too much into it here. Needless to say, Dark Souls quickly grew a following thanks to its reputation as a punishingly difficult game, but its continued popularity, even after a respectable list of sequels, successors and remakes, is something that I think is worth looking into. Dark Souls isn't a good game just because it's difficult. Dark Souls is a good game because buried beneath all that difficulty is a truly masterfully designed game, and I feel there is no better way to showcase this quality than by taking a look at what I think is one of the best areas in the game, the Painted World of Ariamis. While Dark Souls might be the most well-known game in the Souls series, it wasn't the first. In 2009, From Software released Demon's Souls, a game that acted as somewhat of a testing ground for the game mechanics and design philosophies that later Souls games would further refine and perfect. Demon's Souls, unfortunately, like too many games, had to cut some content towards the end of development. If you're unaware, Demon's Souls had 5 worlds that the player had to complete. These worlds were accessed from the Nexus via the Archstones, these huge pillars wreathed around the centre of the hub area. You'll notice, however, a broken Archstone up here. This was supposed to be the Archstone for a world that was cut towards the end of development, called the Land of the Giants. It was meant to be a huge, frozen landscape that led to this massive castle-like area where it is theorized that the player had to complete a puzzle of some kind to progress. Thanks to the modding efforts of the Souls community, we're able to see how this area might have looked before it was cut. Check out this video by Lance McDonald for more information on this fascinating piece of cut content. The point I'm trying to make here, however, is that before development on Demon's Souls wrapped up and work had begun on Dark Souls, the Land of the Giants was likely one of the last areas the developers had worked on. We also know that the Painted World of Ariamis, a similarly wintry area, was one of the first areas to be designed for Dark Souls. The DNA of Demon's Souls is felt all throughout the Souls series, but nowhere else does it cross over so much as it does here. The Painted World is, in my mind, not quite Demon's Souls, not quite Dark Souls. It's the transitory phase from one game to the other, all contained in a meticulously crafted area. We'll go through the Painted World and look at how this crossover manifests itself. The Painted World is a bit of an oddball for both Demon's Souls and Dark Souls. It's the only area in both games to feature snow, and one of the few areas in Dark Souls 1 that the player must teleport to in some way. It all goes towards constructing a very unique feeling for the Painted World that, again, isn't quite Demon's Souls and is not quite Dark Souls. The level design, which we'll get to later, is very much in the vein of Dark Souls, but everything else is Demon's Souls to a T. Demon's Souls had this very still and almost stagnant feeling. The only time you ever hear music in these games is during boss fights, and most of the other ambient tracks are very quiet and understated. Demon's Souls uses ambience to set the tone and the atmosphere of its areas, and it does it very well. This is a lesson that Dark Souls did well to take on, of course, but Demon's Souls just did it better in my opinion. I've probably played Demon's Souls more than any other Souls game, and not to toot my own horn, but I know what it feels like to play these games. I know that atmosphere when I see it, and the Painted World is definitely more of Demon's Souls than of Dark Souls. Let me show you what I mean. Here is the Tower of Latria. Now, here is the Valley of Defilement. No music, but great ambience. These areas are alive and undulating around you, just in a very subtle and quiet way. Dark Souls had a lot more going on with its areas, which still captured this atmosphere very well, but obviously favoured a busier and more varied way. Latria is most like Sen's Fortress, and listen to the ambience here. The valley is most like Blighttown, and you hear the same thing. Now, listen to the Painted World. It's almost 100% Demon Souls, and it definitely doesn't stop there. The Painted World was the first area to be designed for Dark Souls 1, and features a few enemies that Demon Souls players might be familiar with. Here in the courtyard we see our old friends, the Hoplites, an early game enemy from Demon Souls. They are both fought in exactly the same way and are both weak to fire damage. They both take a defensive circular formation and sit in a group before a bridge to a tall boss, which also both feature dangerous dragon-based hazards. We also have hollows, which aren't really exclusive to the Painted World, but attack almost identically to the Draglings from Demon Souls, right down to this flailing attack animation that always manages to catch me off guard and hit me like a million times, and it sucks and I hate it. Also, hollows and Draglings are just totally the same enemy, just look at them. We also have Bonewheel Skeletons, a totally fan favourite enemy, I'm sure, that can absolutely destroy your health bar in mere moments by rolling into you. These guys are an obvious cousin of the skeletons from the Shrine of Storms, who cartwheel into you and gank you into oblivion, an aspect that everybody loved so much that they just had to lean into it for Dark Souls 2. The Engorged Hollows act like these giant tick enemies from the Valley of Defilement, poisoning you if you kill them. However, Dark Souls allows you to kill them with fire to bypass this effect. Demon Souls, by contrast, tells you to eat shit and die. The crows are kinda unique, but they still remind me of the gargoyles from the Tower of Latria, mostly because of their high damage and often encountering them on precarious platforms. Lastly, we have this guy here, called Xanthus King Jeremiah. Jeremy here is basically just a walking Easter egg from Demon Souls, obviously mirroring the old monk boss fight. Both have this very nice hat, and both fight using magic, the old monk using sorcery and Jeremiah using pyromancy. The Painted World, just through its enemies alone, has an incredibly strong connection to Demon Souls, but the biggest connection lies in the boss of this area, Crossbreed Priscilla. Priscilla is an optional boss, which isn't uncommon in Dark Souls, but very much absent in Demon Souls. However, if you decide to listen before attacking her, you monster, she'll tell you that you can leave without any violence by jumping into the void behind her. She's the only non-hostile boss in the entire game, and beseeches you to leave her land and her kind inhabitants alone. This is almost word for word the dialogue given to you by Maiden Astraea, a similarly non-hostile boss fight from Demon Souls.
Leave us, slayer of demons. This is a sanctuary for the lost and wretched. There is nothing here for you to pillage or plunder.
Both of these bosses give you a chance. They ask better of you, and tell you to leave their homes, only wanting to protect those that they share that home with. These two very innocent beings are martyrs for the wretched and the lost. The Painted World and the Valley of Defilement are both described as places where the unwanted are cast into, havens for the imperfect misfits of an equally imperfect world. But they aren't just places that have been left to rot, they are lands upon which you are an intruder, where you are the enemy. And if that isn't a connection, then I don't know what is. I could go through the rest of Dark Souls 1 and point out just how much Demon Souls influenced the game, or maybe even all the Souls games. But playing through the entire series for a video seems like a tall prospect right now, and as the series progresses, the influence of Demon Souls diminishes significantly. Instead, we'll go through the Painted World itself and see how it works from a level design perspective. I'm not a professional in this in any regards, so a lot of this analysis is just going to be my gut feeling. So let's get started. We start the Painted World on a dilapidated bridge, looking up at the wooded area above. As we ascend, we see these bodies skewered to spikes in the ground. Immediately, this area is telling us a story. It's communicating its hostility to us. The fact that these bodies are draped in snow tells us that this place has become stagnant, that the danger has been here for a long time. As we reach the top of the stairs, we finally see our bonfire. It's interesting that the developers chose to delay our bonfire like this. They started us on the bridge, which indicates to me that they wanted us to have this little trek up the stairs, to have this little sneak peek into the area we're about to explore. I believe that the developers wanted to give you the impression at the start of the Painted World that this area is dangerous, if quiet, that it is hostile to everybody, including the player, even if the serene landscape is telling you otherwise. After the bonfire, we encounter our first group of enemies, hollows. That's strange though. At this point in the game, hollows aren't anything new. They're early game enemies, the first you encounter in fact. Why are they showing up here? We cut through our first group of hollows and make our way up onto the outer ramparts. Here we are able to get an overlook of the courtyard and we can see some of the level that lies ahead. We're likely not going to be taking in the view though, as we soon encounter our first unique enemy, the Engorged Hollow. New players aren't likely to know how to handle this enemy and will usually end up poisoned. The game has deceived us by giving us really simple enemies to put us at ease, before throwing us a new enemy. Even though you're now likely poisoned, you're still not in a massive amount of danger, especially if you've got the moss to heal it. But these new hollows subtly inform the player that things aren't going to be that easy. The Engorged Hollows also give us a little more context to this world. It told you that you were in a dangerous place. Now, you're in danger. You've likely been poisoned by an as of yet unseen enemy, and things aren't all as they seem. There are actually two paths here, but we'll continue right up these stairs, and ignoring yet another crossroads, go across this bridge. As you cross this bridge, you'll be shot by this hollow in the distance, and you'll likely make your way straight to it to kill it. The game has led you into a soft trap of sorts. By running here to confront this archer hollow to the right, you ignore what is going on to the left. Two hollows have now scaled the wall behind you, and you've aggroed the enemies in this building. The game has baited you into a worse spot than if you had taken things more slowly. Once we clear this building of enemies, we're again at a crossroads. The Painted World is full of little paths like this that really highlight Dark Souls and its strength of open world design. This building has 5 paths leading to various places. 4 of them only lead to items of varying significance, and 1 leads forward to the end. The greatest thing here is that the game doesn't tell you which way is forward. If you end up on the wrong path, the game rewards you with an okay item and a surprise enemy encounter. If you end up on the correct path, you make progress and a surprise enemy encounter. Speaking of that correct path, we make our way to the central area of the Painted World, this tower with a spiral staircase. Again, we are faced with a couple of paths. We can go up these stairs and fight some birds, or we can continue down a little bit and find the upper walkway of the bridge. Here we get drip-fed a little more context for this place. At the end of the walkway, we find an undead dragon. As we approach, its wing falls off, showing just how much the inhabitants of the Painted World are slowly rotting away in the stagnant time that they exist in. The shine of those items draws us onto the bridge, forcing us to weigh our curiosity against our caution. We see the dragon as equally as we see the items, and the game dares us to try our luck. As we get closer, the dragon wakes up and chases us back up the walkway, likely before we can get both items. Now, we have a very strong enemy in between us and the item that our curiosity told us to go get. This directs us into a situation where we might want to kill the dragon to see what we missed, putting us at risk of dying. Where a bad game would make the use of fear of missing out to shill microtransactions and pointless cosmetics, Dark Souls uses it to motion the player into facing a harder enemy than they might want to fight normally. We can kill it here and get past it, to see that it's separated from its bottom half just to chase us, yet again giving us a morbid peek into the silent and hellish immortality that most of Dark Souls creatures face. It's also worth noting the kind of loot we find in this area. I'm skipping over the optional paths because most of them simply end with a soul item, which are pretty common and aren't of much interest. The only items that really tie into this area in particular is the Black Cleric set, said to belong to the followers of Velka, who appears all over the Painted World in one way or another. Velka's rapier is also here, which has pretty decent stats and deals additional occult damage alongside another weapon you can get in this area. This occult damage could be very useful if you happen to be struggling with Ornstein and Smoke, who are one of the few boss encounters weak to occult damage. The items here aren't really worth much, but the ones that are further reinforce the themes of this area, which is a really nice touch. Going back to the tower, we make our way down to the bottom and out into the courtyard. The courtyard has a number of different paths. The annex is locked off right now, but we can unlock this shortcut back to the bonfire in the meantime. This is a little out of order, but we can go down here to the left and fight Jeremiah, but only after defeating the boss. I can't really explain his presence here in the story or why he only appears when Priscilla is gone, but he does have a nice hat, so I won't complain. Back in the courtyard, we can take out the hoplites, and we're presented with a staircase and a well. Both pretty much lead to the same place, only the staircase leads to a couple more branching paths with items at the end. Down here in the cellars, we are confronted by the bone wheel skeletons in tight corridors, which make it hard to dodge them, basically guaranteeing that we'll take damage. You could argue that this is bad design, but I'm biased, so I'm going to try and make a case for this. Ever since Alone in the Dark, games have been feeding us the idea that not every enemy should be fought. It is beneficial in Dark Souls to learn how to run away from fights as much as it is important to learn how to fight. The Cellars have given you an enemy that is most definitely better to avoid rather than fight head on. If you can't avoid them because of the slim tunnels, Dark Souls has done well to incentivize using shields. If you haven't figured out either of these at this point in the game, the Bone Whale Brigade is going to teach you very quickly. Down in the cellars, we want to pick up the annex key and turn this crank. We're given a cutscene of this statue, turning around to face the boss. Despite the Velka imagery I mentioned before, we don't know if this statue is actually Velka herself. The statue actually stands holding a child, and many have theorized that this statue actually represents a young Priscilla and her mother. Why else would it face her when we turn the crank? Why would the hoplites, Priscilla's imperfect kin, be surrounding this statue, almost defending it? I'm not sure. It's just another one of those quiet little stories that Dark Souls likes to tell. We now have a straight shot to the boss, but we'll go to the annex first. Up here is nothing special. We get a few nice items and face a couple of enemies. The only notable thing here is the repetition of the crows, surrounding the dead blacksmith that holds the dark ember. Just another little bit of visual storytelling that leaves us wondering. We can now make our way up to the bridge and into some more small pieces of interesting design. For a start, we're once again faced with hollows. Again, we see the same trap that the devs laid for us at the start of the level, giving us a hollow archer that we'll likely run towards to dispatch quickly, leaving us open to the hollows that have just spawned behind us. This tells me that the first trap was intentional, and is repeated here to test the observational players. Taking out hollows is not a difficult task, so I think the level designers are utilizing these little tricks of enemy placement to increase the difficulty of a naturally simple enemy. Now we can face our last enemy before the boss, the Baronite Knight, or the Tower Knight, as the Fextra Life wiki interestingly calls it. It's a pretty rare enemy that we only face 3 times in the game, meaning its placement here was very intentional. I think this is more for their gameplay aspects than the story, as these guys don't really have much lore behind them and likely just serve as an extra challenge for the player. Its placement here, right at the end of the level, is also interesting. Fighting these enemies is a moderate challenge already, but now we're fighting one that has been specifically placed on a very precarious part of the bridge. The dynamic can lead to 2 equally possible plans of attack. We can either risk dying this late in the level in return for some more souls and potential loot, or we can risk maneuvering our way around it on such a thin walkway, getting us to the boss fight quicker. Whatever way we tackle this though, we're now ready to face Priscilla. For the first time in the series, we have a boss that doesn't fight us on sight. Instead, we can talk to her and totally not kill her. She asks us to leave, and we can do that by walking off this gangway behind her, but not before claiming a very nice hat. And that does it. You get dropped back into the cathedral in Anor Londo, and we can continue with the rest of our journey. The Painted World is not a very large area. It's actually one of the smallest in the entire series. But even with how simple it was, the design here was a thing of beauty. The Painted World of Ariamis is the leftovers of Demon Souls crammed into Dark Souls, and this strange mix led to something rather brilliant. But there is much more than just influence working to make this area great. Dark Souls did its own thing too, and even in such a practically beta area as the Painted World, it managed to have an influence of its very own. Despite being a small optional area that can only be accessed through pretty obscure means in the mid-game, the Painted World proved to be a fan favourite area and is very well regarded in the Souls community. If we only look at its presence in Dark Souls 1, we have an area that is only tangentially related to the main goal of being the chosen undead that links the flame or brings in a new age of darkness. It's a place where the unwanted are kept from the eyes of an uncaring world and features minor connective pieces of lore that, at first glance, don't impact the overall story. Crossbreed Priscilla is just that, a crossbreed of a dragon and a human, an unnatural being sequestered away in a painted world, protected from intruders by painting guardians. The story here, like most of Dark Souls, is rather obscure and non-specific. It's unclear whether Priscilla is a prisoner of this world or willingly stays with the inhabitants that she presumably identifies with. Are the painting guardians keeping her in, or are they keeping you out? If Priscilla was the daughter of a princess and a dragon who was a respected ally of her father, why would she even be imprisoned in the first place? Why does the Painted World of Ariamis contain consistent imagery of Velka, the goddess of sin, with these crow-like beings representing her? Who was Ariamis, and why did they paint a sinful and rotten world? Was it made for Priscilla, or was she simply another inhabitant thrown in here after the fact? Why does this peculiar doll, which is implied to have transported Priscilla herself here in the first place, lying in your cell at the start of the game, only appearing during your second visit to the Undead Asylum, guarded by a Black Knight? Yet another thing that is completely optional. If the Painted World is such a bad place where only the wretched go, why is the painting in a cathedral and protected over generations? Why does Jeremiah have such a nice hat? These are all questions posed by this one area, which I will remind you again is completely optional and entirely possible to miss. If we expand our view to Dark Souls 3, this area with only minor relevance is given major plot significance, having an effect over the entirety of Dark Souls and its extended lore. So how does this tiny little level gain such traction over the entirety of Dark Souls? Honestly, I don't know. People certainly hold this area in high opinion. People certainly hold Priscilla in very high opinion. But what does it do that the rest of the game doesn't? From Software definitely knew that this area was well loved and lent into it later down the line. But why? Was it the unique atmosphere? Was it the enemies? Was it the level design? Was it the story? Was it the waifu? Was it the very nice hats? Who knows? The Painted World of Ariamis seems to hold a special place in the hearts of Dark Souls players, and I'm definitely one of them. I think it goes back to a point I made in a previous video about open world games. Players seem to have a stronger connection to areas that feel like home. It's an aspect of game design that few can ever achieve, and when we get it, we cherish it. Dark Souls is a difficult game, and even though the Painted World is no less hostile than some areas, it just feels comfier, if that makes sense. It's a dangerous area, but it's not an immediately repulsive area like Blighttown. It gives off the same vibe as the Firelink Shrine. Dark Souls manages to make you feel at greater ease in an area that is actively trying to kill you than an area that is practically empty. I think players like this area for a large combination of reasons, but I don't think it would have been as well loved if it wasn't for how this area makes you feel. If the Painted World was some poison fest like Blighttown, or the precarious nightmare that is the later half of Anor Londo, players would have written this area off. It's a calm and serene environment that allows you to explore a time and a place that is not your own, even within the game itself. It gives you such a unique atmosphere in one stage that most games would struggle to maintain for their entirety. It tells you a story almost solely through visuals and carefully coordinated direction, and if you're trying to learn anything about level design like myself, it's important to understand how these visuals and how that direction is employed. It manages to draw us into a cold and lonely painted world and make us one with it, more so than any other area in the Souls series has ever managed to do. These quiet nighttime ruins, draped in snow, are really all this area needed to ease you in. The winding maze-like pathways keep you exploring while it all sinks in, and the obscure scraps of a sad story begging to be told keep us coming back. They say a picture can paint 1,000 words, and Dark Souls shows us that a painting can be so much more.